Why is my kid diagnosed as autistic?
I think it's such an important topic because, again, it's so censored. And it's like, look, there isn't 1 in 12.5 adult males in California with autism.
Dr. Joel Gator Warsh is not your average pediatrician. He is board certified, integrative, and unafraid to speak the truth. He's one of the few doctors today courageous enough to talk about what most won't: the real risks, the broken trust, and the need for transparency in modern medicine. Through his work, his outspoken social media presence, and his newest book on vaccines, he's giving parents what the system won't: real, balanced, evidence-backed information that empowers, not pressures.
In the span of over a decade of you working as a pediatrician, how many kids have you met that were autistic?
It's hard to quantify, but it's definitely increased, no question about it.
Why is it that by the age of 1, we have to receive so many different vaccines for children?
Two things can be true at the same time. You can be worried about minimizing infectious disease and also be worried about minimizing chronic disease.
What is your vision for the future when it comes to kids thriving?
To me, it means really getting back to a state of wellness and really focusing on those important things like family and health, and really trying to get back to that life. The life that I think a lot of people had many years ago, where they focus on family, focus on meals, focus on appreciation, as opposed to quicker, faster, easier, cheaper.
Hi, Dr. Joel, and welcome to the Be That Life experience. It's so cool to have such an incredible human on my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am really, really excited about this conversation, mainly because, I'm a mom, and I was a young mom. So I had a son at the age of 22. And can you only imagine the amount of people in the world out there who don't know how to navigate being a parent at 22, let alone just, your early 20s. So really it was, I would say, a very challenging time of my life. And rewarding, but also, it's cool being a young parent, but there's the downsides to that, because if you're young yourself and you have no clue on how, to bring up a child, and you don't have the right experience, it can also be kind of detrimental to how you raise your child and the way they become as adults, not just from a mental health standpoint, but also from the well-being of the child, right? From the way that their health evolves over time. And your book just came out, and really excited to talk about that too. But before we really get into that, I know that you're board-certified pediatrician, but when did you actually start getting into the functional space, is my curiosity.
I started getting into it around residency and my training. I think a lot of it's to do with my wife, or my now wife. She's very holistic minded. So it's always a wife thing, and she opened up my eyes a little bit to that. And at the same time, I just really started getting frustrated, really frustrated with the regular system, seeing kids getting sicker than ever, not really having solutions to issues, seeing people going outside of the regular system and getting better. And I've always been a pretty open-minded person. And so that really opened up my eyes to, all right, there's more to learn. I need to learn about prevention. I need to learn about integrative medicine and functional medicine. And so that really, all those things together pushed me to start learning about it. And it's been a fantastic journey over the last decade or so, really diving into that and trying to balance both worlds. And I always start by saying this: I'm not against modern medicine. I think we have a lot of amazing things. I think it's just that we're so quick to give a medication, and we are so quick to kind of call some of this other stuff like woo-woo or out there, even though it's done all over the world and it's used very successfully and can be very beneficial at times. And so I think we just really need to balance both worlds and use some alternative medicine, some modern medicine, and find some happy balance. Especially because kids seem sicker than ever, and we're seeing chronic disease rise all over the world, and certainly in America. And we need to have a little humility, I think, in medicine to say, look, we're living longer than we did 100 years ago. We're not living till 40, so that's good. But life expectancy is going back down. Chronic disease rates are going up. So maybe there are some things we could do a little better.
I honestly feel that we are in a stage in human existence where people are no longer just silenced anymore. I recently had Dr. Asim Malhotra, who was on my podcast, and that episode went mega viral because he was talking about the vaccines. And it went viral because People are tired of being told the same narrative and being told that they should just follow the system blindly, and they can't question the system, and they can't be told to do anything else than what the system tells them. And it's nice that we have people like him and doctors like him who are really speaking out about it, because not only the fact that, you know, it gives us a completely different way to look at healthcare and the healthcare system and just human existence, but also it gives other doctors this voice to want to go out and speak, the courage to do so. So thank you for being one of those people as well, to want to go out there and speak about these things, because we definitely need more people like yourself to be talking about these things, because if we're not speaking about it, then we're not creating that awareness that we all need, right? I mean, we've been silenced for too long, and it can't go any longer because it's not helping our society thrive. And like you said, you know, sure, we are surpassing the age of 40, but our health span isn't getting any better, and by the age of 80, 90, we're still in wheelchairs. So how is that helping us progress? Because it isn't, right? And then we have the likes of Brian Johnson, for example, who's really like changing the game. And I was recently at his summit, the Superhuman Summit in Stockholm, and I just got back from that. And the conversation there was really about how can we make superhumans? How can we extend not just lifespan but health span, and evolve in a generation where we're reaching centenarian levels, but walking, thriving, you know, running with our grandchildren, and doing things differently than what we're doing today. Now, yes, I mentioned that your book just came out, but you've obviously written several books. But the book that you are so, you know, kind of like, I guess, advocating for today is obviously a book about vaccines, and just trying to navigate that, understanding the vaccine culture today, and giving parents just that informed kind of decision, and confident enough to question their pediatrician, and to question the system, and to question the kind of vaccines that are going into their newborn babies' bodies, right? Now, children by the age of 1 receive several vaccines. They're almost a dose of like 20 different vaccines, sometimes at the same time and even in the same day. And me, myself, at the age of 22, when I, you know, trusted the system and was going to give my son the vaccine, I actually didn't even know what these were for. They just said you need to go to do your routine vaccinations, and you just blindly go and do it, right? Without even questioning the system, because we've been programmed to thinking, yeah, this is normal. Now, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, why is it that by the age of 1, we have to receive so many different vaccines for children?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me go back a little bit, and then I'll get to that question. I think, you know, what you mentioned with censorship is so important. To me, I never really talked about vaccines until recently. Obviously, I talked about it in my office with patients, but it was so censored. It's so unfortunate that we couldn't talk about this word. Like, you'd say the word vaccine on social media and you would get, you know, kicked off or censored or deplatformed or whatever. And that's crazy. It's a thing we're doing, like you said, like 20 plus times in the first year, 2 years, and you can't ask questions about it. A good parent can't wonder whether they have concerns about it, whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, what are the risks. They can't ask their doctor about. Like, that's insane. We should be able to talk about it. We should be able to talk about everything. And over the pandemic, I got more frustrated. I started writing things down. I wasn't sure if I was going to do a vaccine book or not, but I just kind of started putting it together. And then, you know, as things went on and as it kind of concluded and seeing how things have moved, I really did feel impassioned to write it and get it out there. And I think the timing is good. I think, you know, we're talking about it more. Censorship has really decreased. I've been very lucky to get on some major platforms to be able to discuss it, and people are open to doing it, which is great. And I think that's what we need. My position on vaccines, I'm not against vaccines. I think the words like anti-vaccine, pro-vaccine don't make any sense. It's really very extremist and not really useful. I think you're not anti-vaccine if you have a question about vaccines. You're not anti-vaccine if you want the safest possible products. I don't believe people should be forced to do anything. I believe, and what I practice in my office, I have patients that do the regular schedule. I have people that do a slower schedule. Some don't do it. I believe we should give people information, and they should be able to do what they feel like is best for their family. And that's what we do in medicine for everything else. We don't force people to do anything. The schedule is recommended, medications are recommended, and people decide if they want to do it or not. And that's where I think we really need to get back to with medicine, is not so much forcing, but kind of discussing. And so that's one of the big reasons why I wrote the book. It wasn't to tell people what to do. It doesn't tell people what to do. It discusses what we know. It discusses the big controversies, the big questions that parents have, and lays out what we know. And almost every book that I've ever read, really all the books, they're very one-sided. It's like you get two different worlds on hepatitis B. It's like the best product ever and it's never caused a problem, and it's the worst product ever, depending on which book you read. And we need to see Secretary Kennedy's information right beside Paul Offit, who, people like that. Like, we need both sides, and parents need to see both and not just hear, oh, vaccines are safe and effective, they're the best thing ever, or vaccines are the worst thing ever, and they're never going to help you. And we need to kind of see both sides. And so that's what led me to write the book. And then, kind of back to your question, yeah, parents are concerned because they're just doing so many vaccines in the first year. And I think people have questions around that, and they wonder, look, when I was growing up, I got, 5 vaccines, 7 vaccines, and now my kid's getting 20 or 30, maybe 6 on one day with multiple things in them. Is that okay? Is that safe? And I think those are reasonable questions, because for the most part, these things haven't been studied. They haven't been studied together. The research is very surprising when you get into it. And it's not to say that it isn't. It's just that it's reasonable to ask.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned the point, and this is a pretty good point, is that let's just say it was even in the 70s or 80s where we were getting less vaccines than we're getting today. We were getting like 7 shots, and now we're taking over 72. So it would be just good to understand from a point of view of our listeners, or parents who are trying to understand, why do we have so many more vaccines?
I mean, there are a few different reasons. I would say, the first reason is, over time, we've had more research in science. And so with that, you can create more vaccines. And so part of that is good. I mean, we're preventing, certain diseases. So I think that's, a positive side of it. The other side of it is, especially in 1986, we had the Vaccine Act, which got put in place, which gave liability protection to the companies. And so you virtually can't sue them at this point, or it's really hard to do so. And after that point, we saw a massive explosion in vaccines on the schedule. And again, some of that's good. I mean, we're protecting against more diseases, but then there was a lot of a push for these companies to get vaccines out for all sorts of different diseases, get it on the childhood schedule, and then millions of kids would get it, which is obviously very profitable for those companies. So it's a balance, right? It's both things. I mean, we want to protect against more. I mean, I guess sometimes when I say, like, if you could have a magic pill and you could give it to your kid, they would never get sick, it would prevent them from all disease, and they would never have a side effect, that's great. I mean, but that's not the reality of the world. That's not the reality of vaccines. There's a risk versus a benefit. And we really don't talk about the risks very much about vaccines. And it's not just some magical thing. There are risks to this. And so we have to decide, as we're adding more, is there a downside to that? And we're seeing all this chronic disease, and is it related in some way? We just don't really know.
And as a pediatrician going through medical school and then getting into the vaccine space, and then having to vaccinate children or prescribe certain vaccines for children, especially newborn, is this just like how it is? Is it just a system that you need to kind of like tick the vaccine box, or are pediatricians doing their job responsibly and understanding the research behind that before they're vaccinating children?
I think that most doctors don't really know the research, because I would say almost all, right? I think that if I didn't know it, then most people don't know it, right? I've learned a lot over the last few years. I get asked these questions all the time. And a lot of what I learned, I really didn't even learn until I went to sit down to write the book. I mean, I would say know more than most, just because I get asked a lot about it. But I definitely didn't know a lot of what I learned going through it. And the reality is, when you're in training, you are not taught about safety. You are taught, all right, here are the vaccines on the regular schedule. Here are the diseases. Here's what we're protecting them against. These things used to be so horrible, and now they're not so horrible. We don't really see it anymore. Vaccines are amazing. So here's the schedule that we do. And it's not nefarious. Like doctors are not bad people. This is what we're taught. And so we say, okay, like that's the schedule. We want to help kids. We want to prevent disease. And so we just go and do that. And it just becomes part of your religion almost to give vaccines. And you don't look at how were these studied originally? Where are the gaps in research? What do we actually know about these things? You just kind of take it at its word that the CDC and the other big agencies and public health agencies around the world know what they're talking about and have our best interests at heart. And vaccines are good. And look, we don't have these things anymore, so that must be good, right? And I think that's how we take it. And probably a part of that's true. I mean, vaccines do have some good for sure, but if we can't discuss it and question it, then I don't think we can get to a better place, and we can't get to an authentic place with vaccines, which is what I think we need to do. And I don't by any means think that we should just like abolish vaccines, but I think that we have to have some humility to say maybe we don't have the best products we're ever going to have in humanity. Maybe they could be made better. Maybe there are some things that could be made safer. Maybe there are some problems that we're not aware of. And if we don't ask the questions, then how are we going to make them better? Because the companies aren't going to do it. No company is going to say, hey, by the way, let's get 100,000 kids, spend $1 billion. Let's look for a problem in our product. And then that way we can find this problem so we can have it taken off the market. Like, why would they do that? No, what they're doing is they fund everything. They fund med schools and news and journals and everything. And they know what they're doing. So that way they shape the narrative so that they can say these things are great. And so that's just what we think. And we have to push back. There's nobody policing them. There's nobody watching over these companies anymore. There's nobody pushing back. We have to do that. We have to say, we want the safest products. We need these things to be tested more. And it's not happening right now.
It's just so mind-blowing what you just said to me right now. It just confirms what so many people have been questioning for so long, and yet no one wanted to ever speak up about it, And it's crazy that I raised my son at a time where no one questioned anything at all. This was like 20 years ago, right? And like we're living in a day now where like we're allowed to question things. And I mentioned so much about like being a parent myself and understanding that. Like, are you a parent? Do you have children?
Yeah, 2 kids. One's 5 and one's 1.5.
So you are also at the stage where you understand the critical parts of the organ and the brain development of children at that age, right? And at the age of 6, actually, my son developed a neurological disorder. He developed motor tics. And back then, I had no idea what that was because I didn't grow up in a community or society of anybody that had that. So for me, that was kind of like a shock. So of course, I took him to a pediatrician, and the pediatrician was like, I mean, it will go away. Nothing's wrong with him. But then the tics got so severe that I had to go and take him to see a neurologist because I was trying to understand and do my own research online and try to understand what was going on. They prescribed him Prozac. And they told him he had mild form of Tourette's. Can you imagine how someone at the age of 6 will be, like a parent would give a child that at that age, but also like, even though I'm young and I didn't know at that time, I still knew that that's wrong. I still knew that there was a gap in the system at that time, and that there was something that I needed to do to figure out like, hey, there's something wrong here. What is it that I'm not understanding, or that the doctors don't really understand at this current state? And at that time, I kind of like blamed it all to maybe it was nutrition, maybe it was the heavy metals, but now understanding it all and like doing deeper research into it, it could also be a trigger for vaccines, because I've been, they have been case reports and parental studies and parental reports actually that stated that certain vaccines, like the MMR and the DTaP vaccines, actually trigger a neurological disorder or function in children when they take these vaccines, and they trigger an immune activation, where there's some kids who are just like more sensitive to be prone to certain kind of neurological disorders. And now when I look at it in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. I never ever looked at vaccines being the issue, and always looked at it from maybe it was, contamination in food or heavy metals and various other things, but never looked at it from a vaccine perspective. Please elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean that's such a wise perspective, and I think it's very a reasonable perspective, and it's really unfortunate that we don't take that general perspective in medicine at all. I mean, still it's starting, I think, a little bit to permeate in, but we don't talk about root cause, and whether it's vaccines or something else, just to give a medication, and a medication can be useful sometimes. There's no question about it, but we don't ask why. Like we just don't ask, okay, what could it be in our life? Maybe we got a vaccine that week, maybe we ate something, maybe we were exposed to something. What was the trigger, and is it possible to figure it out? There are a lot of tests that we can do now to look into some of these things. We may not be able to figure out, it may have nothing to do with any of that, but it's not unreasonable to try to dive a little bit deeper. And we know that vaccines can cause issues. I mean, it's well documented that you can have a seizure, you can get encephalitis, inflammation in the brain. So why is it unreasonable to think that it couldn't cause a take in a child? That's a very plausible correlation that one could make. And I, obviously don't know if it did or didn't for certain kids, but it's certainly reasonable to discuss it. And that just goes back to the greater problem. We weren't able to talk about these things. We've never done the proper research on long-term safety. We don't follow vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids. We don't follow them forward over time. So we just don't know. We just don't know. I mean, just because you get a vaccine today and get ticks later this afternoon, doesn't mean that it has anything to do with it, because you might have not got the vaccine this morning and still had those ticks. But if 1,000 kids get vaccines this morning and get a tick this afternoon, you should certainly look into it as something plausible. And it's not about pro-vaccine, or it's like, if they're causing an issue, why wouldn't we want to know that? Why, if they're related to autism, if they're related to asthma, if they're related to autoimmune conditions, what doctor wants to harm kids? You don't want to harm kids. You want to minimize disease in the short term and infectious disease, while also minimizing chronic disease. And if there is some relation there, which we're really not studying very much at this point, wouldn't we want to know? Because maybe there's an ingredient in there that we could change that would decrease your risk. Maybe the schedule, if we minimized it, would be different, or we'd change it in some way. We want healthy kids. Like I want my kids to be healthy. I don't care if they get 10,000 vaccines or 0 vaccines, if it makes them healthier. I just want to know what that is. And when you make this blanket statement that, long-term, complications that are severe are 1 in a million, that's just not true. There's just no way that's true. It's definitely more than that. And we have to figure out exactly how it's related, because there are good studies out there that show if you decrease the amount of vaccines, or you move a vaccine back, that they've seen in some of those studies, you have a decrease of asthma by 50% or a decrease in allergies. So we need to follow those studies up with better studies to say, hey, like, if aluminum, let's just say, triggers asthma in some percentage of kids, shouldn't we know that? So that way we could say, maybe we can put a different adjuvant in there, or maybe we can create a different vaccine. Or if you get the proper studies and it doesn't show it, then that's going to be the information that's going to make parents more comfortable to get vaccines. But just saying that they're safe and effective doesn't make any sense. And I think during the pandemic, that is really where science lost public trust.
Yes.
When you say something that can't possibly be true, like safe and effective, you could have said, based on the research and the data that we have, we feel like the benefits outweigh the risks. We feel like from what we've seen, you decrease your risk of hospitalization and death, and the risks that we see seem to be minimal at the short term that we know, so we recommend it. That's fine. That's honest. You could say that. But to say safe and effective when you haven't had more than 2 or 3 months of research, or maybe 5 or 6 months at that point, that's just lying. It's just propaganda. And people realize that now. And then they just say, well, if that's what you're saying to me, if you're lying to me about that and natural immunity, what else are you lying to me about? I don't trust anything in medicine anymore. And that's where we are. People don't trust doctors, and they're trying to decrease hesitancy. And yet we have the highest rates of hesitancy from vaccines we've ever had, the most unvaccinated kids, the most exemptions. So medicine's actually creating the problem that they're trying to solve by not having discussions and having open, nuanced debate and listening to parents and labeling parents anti-vaxxers because they have a concern. A parent who comes in, gets a vaccine, their kid has a reaction that they attribute to a vaccine, they talk about it, you label them as something, and say, that parent's not an anti-vaxxer. They literally took their kid in to get a vaccine and they feel like this happened. So that's important information. We need to listen to parents. We need to listen to moms.
You mentioned something, a really important point, and I think this is valuable information for our listeners, is that you mentioned about the point on aluminium. Now, just to put a little bit on context, where children are receiving over 4,000 mcg equivalent of aluminium in the vaccines, right? And when you think about it, though, we're like minimizing the amount of aluminium that we're putting in IV for nutrition, IV drips. Now, why is that point not even mentioned to parents, and why is that not being questioned? Why are parents not being given that type of information? We're literally just told, this is the type of vaccines you need to take for the risks that you want to prevent, and the chronic diseases you want to prevent, but not even being told what these are for. Why? Why are doctors not questioning that? And why are not responsible enough to tell the parents that too?
So let's go back a little bit, I think, in history, because I think this is a really important point, and I would say that aluminum is probably the biggest concern at the moment for most parents. I agree with that. For whatever reason, we seem to minimize in medicine potential risks of these small things when it comes to vaccines. What the mainstream narrative would be around aluminum is it's a very small amount, it's safe, and you get a lot more when you eat. When you eat food every single day, you're getting a lot more. So that's kind of the mainstream discussion around aluminum. If you go back, in history, we talked about lead, right? And lead wasn't in vaccines, but we had a safe limit of lead. We weren't worried about it. It was in paint, it was in pipes. And then all of a sudden we're like, maybe it's not so safe. We studied a little bit more. Now there's no safe level of lead. So we have concerns around it. Mercury in vaccines. There was thimerosal in vaccines for a long time. Mostly it's been phased out now, but it's still in some vaccines. But at some point, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, somebody was like, hey, wait a minute, we have more mercury that we're giving to kids in vaccines than we allow in food. It's a different form of mercury, but wait a minute, if we're worried about this amount of mercury in food and we're injecting it into kids, should we be worried about that? Could it be causing an issue? And that, to me, blows my mind, because you're you would put something like mercury in a vaccine and you wouldn't even think to study it for safety before putting it in the vaccine. And somebody later on was like, hey, maybe this is a problem. We're injecting mercury. And it was never definitively proven to be a problem, but it was pulled off the market proactively because there was enough concern around it. So that happened. And then now we have aluminum, right? So the aluminum is the new one. And again, we have this conversation around, it's just a small amount, it's totally safe. And that may be true. I don't know. But if you look at aluminum in general, there are safety limits for every other aspect of aluminum. Like in drinking water, you can have 0.2 milligrams per liter. And in some vaccines, you have more than that. Like in the hepatitis B, you have 0.25. They get around that by saying, well, you're drinking a lot more water. It's a lot more, throughout the day. This is just one vaccine. So that's the mainstream discussion around it. And again, it's still shown to be safe technically. But I think it's reasonable to have concerns around it. I think it's reasonable for a parent to say, hey, you have limits at the EPA and the FDA and how much you can have in my work environment of how much I can breathe in, but then you're injecting into my kids. And now we have more vaccines with more aluminum. So what about that cumulative effect? And hey, what about kids that are more sensitive and premature and have kidney issues? How does that affect them? And so I just don't think it's unreasonable to have those questions and to wonder whether this is going to be the next thing where we're going to be like, hey, it's totally safe. And then 10 years from now, we're going to be like, actually, it's not totally safe. And again, I don't know, but that's what research is for. And we shouldn't shut down questions around it, because just because you can eat a little bit of aluminum doesn't mean it's the same thing as injecting it. It's a different way your body handles it. It's a different place. It's bypassing your normal safety systems for your body. So maybe that's different. Maybe, and it's literally injected into your body to do something. It's literally injected to affect your immune system, to make your immune system and the vaccine work better. So why for some kids couldn't that have a negative effect? I don't think that's unreasonable to ask.
When when infants are just developing, why are we giving vaccines at such a young age? Is there a reason?
Well, the mainstream reason would be the diseases that you're protecting against you're most at risk from at the youngest age. So the younger you are, the younger you give the vaccines, the protection you're getting at that time. So that's the counter argument, right? Because, and that is true, the youngest babies are most at risk from some of these diseases. So if you're protecting them from those diseases when they're 2 months or 1 month, then you're getting the protection when they need it most. But the flip side that a parent would have a concern around is, I'm giving this vaccine to my newborn baby whose immune system's developing. It's certainly not fully developed at a month or 2 months. I mean, it's developing their whole life, but certainly over the first couple of years. And Could the vaccine affect the immune system in some way that we're just not aware of at this point? Could it affect the way that it's developing? Could it change the trajectory of the immune system? Could it do something for some kids, some subset, maybe some genetics involved, whatever it is, that leads kids towards having more likelihood of having an autoimmune condition or a tics or seizures or whatever? I just don't think it's unreasonable to ask, especially in the setting of seeing chronic disease rates skyrocketing, that we shouldn't at least include vaccines in the picture. Of course, there are many things that have changed in the world over the last 20 or 30 years. And I think vaccines are just one part of that picture. But when you have a rapidly increasing amount of vaccines, it's not unreasonable to ask these questions, because otherwise we're going to have 1,000 vaccines in kids. And if they are causing a reaction and we're not asking the question, it's just going to get worse. But if we do discuss this and we do get appropriate prospective research, maybe we'll find things and maybe we can make changes to make them safer. And there's nothing anti-vaccine about that or controversial about safer products. We want decreased disease, decreased chronic disease, both things. They can both be true.
And you said that, in the last 20 and 30 years, sure, modern medicine has evolved, and it's the same for them really now understanding about gut health, right? And the connection between the gut and the brain axis. And now we know for sure, and we realize that our gut microbiome is so different, and it's different even if you share the same bloodline, same family, it's going to be different. So if that's the case, I would say this should be the same for vaccines. However, vaccines are generic and it's not personalized to an individual at all. Why do they not personalize vaccines based on what they have understood about modern medicine now? And it's been such a long time from what medicine used to be like. And we've changed and evolved over time. And like you say, science always evolving. However, vaccines have stayed the same. We're just getting more, but it's not personalized. How are parents supposed to feel comfortable about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's not been studied like that. It's not been studied in any sort of personalized way. It's been studied or been, I guess, given out in a way that's for the masses. It's for public health. It's a one-size-fits-all strategy, and that's the easiest and the most economical, presumably. So that's why it's done that way, and that's what the research has shown, air quotes, beneficial. But again, it's not been studied in any other way. You don't see studies that are comparing different schedules for outcomes. I mean, again, this is the kind of research you should have. Like, if you do vaccine on this day versus this day, or you get this vaccine at, the hepatitis B at birth versus hepatitis B at 2 years old, does that have some sort of implication for chronic disease? Like, can we minimize our risk for hepatitis B while also minimizing our risk of side effects? Like, there's nothing anti-science about that. You're not saying you don't want to do this hepatitis B vaccine. You're just saying, like, maybe you don't do it on the first day of life for some people. Or can we start to get some research around personalized genetics, personalized side effects, risk factors, supplements, herbs? Like, maybe there are things that we can do or that we can look into to say, hey, you have this kind of genetics, it increases your risk to have a reaction to the measles vaccine. Oh, you have these kind of genetics, if you take this supplement, it's going to decrease your risk of side effects. Like, again, this is going to increase vaccination because people are going to be more confident to do it. And if there are some sort of genetics that increases your risk to get a reaction, maybe some kids are more susceptible to get a reaction to having seizures. So, like, maybe if we study this over the next 10 years and look in those genetics for kids that have seizures, maybe we can figure out a pattern and say, hey, these are the kids we don't give this vaccine to. We're going to protect them because they're the ones that are going to be at risk for seizures. And then we still giving most of the kids the vaccines, but decreasing the kids that are going to get seizures. Like, man, none of this is woo-woo. It's like, let's make safe vaccines for kids and let's get it the best that we can do it. And if you just say, they don't cause problems and we're never going to study it, we're never going to get to a better place. We want our kids to be healthy, and we should be open to asking about every single thing, including vaccines. It shouldn't be taboo. They're not going anywhere, but we can make them better.
Are there any advancements in technology today that it's moving towards that you're seeing in terms of personalization?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is the mRNA technology, and maybe the most controversial, well, not maybe, for sure, the most controversial thing at the moment in terms of the vaccine world, other than autism stuff, which we can talk about if you want to.
Yeah, so if you can just explain that technology for our listeners.
Yeah, so the original, all the vaccines we've had up until the last couple of years have been you either take a bacteria or virus and you kill it and you inject that, or you take a piece of it, like a protein, and you inject that. So your body has a response to that antigen. The mRNA technology, you basically give a piece of genetic material, and then your body creates the proteins that you have the antibody response again. So it's a different kind of technology. And it's something that is certainly more easily manipulated. So you can change it a lot more easily because you just change the sequence in there, and then you could do that. So in terms of, I guess, science, that's like a big step forward and potentially could have a lot of good benefits. But of course, with this research are two different, like vastly different worlds of the COVID vaccine was great and it saved a lot of lives and saved trillions of dollars. And that was a great thing. And then you have the whole other world of people that are like, it's the worst thing ever and it's killing more people and it's causing all sorts of trouble. And those two worlds don't ever seem to connect or debate or discuss. And so most people just really are unsure. I mean, there is no question that COVID vaccine has caused a lot of issues. I mean, we have seen that. It's really a question of benefits versus risks. And everybody really does kind of land in different places in terms of benefits versus risk on this vaccine. But I do think it's really important that we move to a place again where we can have these conversations, because this is an important thing. If it really is causing significant issues and the risks outweigh the benefits, like we need to know it, because the vaccines are moving in that direction. Otherwise, they're going to have a lot more. It's a lot easier to make them. And you can really make a vaccine for almost anything with this technology. So we better get it right if we're going to use it, and we better make sure we're minimizing any sort of side effects or risks, and not just say that it's safe. Like we have to have humility to really understand what the risks are, because even if there are risks, it doesn't mean we shouldn't use it. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't think about it. It doesn't mean that there isn't going to be potential benefits in the future. Like maybe you can make some mRNA technology or whatever kind of vaccine for late stage cancer that could save somebody's life. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you have a risk of myocarditis, but I don't care. I'm going to die. Like I'll take that risk of myocarditis to see if I can cure my cancer. So it's not a one size fits all. It's nuanced, but we have to be very honest, especially if we're injecting it into little kids, newborn babies who are completely healthy and developing. And we have to say, like, okay, what are the side effects of these kids long term? Because you may not want to vaccinate against whooping cough if it gives you a 1 in 10 chance of having some sort of serious complication. Like you need to know that. It doesn't mean that we don't want to minimize our risk for measles, right? Nobody wants measles. I don't want anybody to die from measles. But if you get a new measles vaccine and it gives you a 1 in 5 chance to die, like, those aren't good weights. Like you have to decide which one's better. Is it a 1 in a million risk or a 1 in 10 risk? Like I need to know that before I can make a risk benefit analysis of what I want to give myself or my kid. So we have to be able to ask those questions.
In the span of over a decade of you working as a pediatrician, how many kids have you met that were autistic?
It's hard to quantify, but it's definitely increased, no question about it. It's difficult for me because the nature of my practice, people seek out my practice if they have, complicated medical histories. It's certainly not in my practice of the kids that are born to my practice anywhere near the numbers that you see. I mean, the numbers are staggering. If you go back few decades, it was like 1 in 10,000. And then in 2000, it was like 1 in 150. Now we're seeing numbers like 1 in 31, 1 in 12.5 boys.
But also we've just become better at diagnosing it, because I guess back in the day it was harder, right? But that still requires us to question it. Even though we're getting better at diagnosis and we're seeing a lot more now, like parents are still entitled to question, why is my kid autistic? Why is my kid diagnosed as autistic?
Right. Right. I think it's such an important topic because, again, it's so censored. And it's like, look, there isn't 1 in 12.5 adult males in California with autism. That's ridiculous. Like, yes, we are better at diagnosing it. Yes, we're more aware of it. That's certainly true. And certainly for mild, I would say autism, where you're fully functional. There were a lot of adults that were never diagnosed, that were diagnosed much older. And there are many more kids that are diagnosed today that were not. So that's absolutely true. It's a part of it, but it's a small part of it. It's happening more. We have much more severe autism. You can go to any classroom and you can see that. You can go to any playground and see it. So yes, it's happening more. And we have to be able to discuss that and to stop having this ridiculous debate of whether it's happening more or not. It's happening more, and we have to figure out why. And especially for the severe autism, And we're not talking about someone who has very mild autism or has superhuman, skills or super, gene. There are kids that are just like they're autistic, but they're brilliant and wonder, and that's great. You don't need any support, wonderful. But there are a lot of families that need a lot of support, and you can have compassion for everybody, and you can support the families that need support, and you can separate it by the people that need support. And maybe there are things that are in our environment that are triggering it for some. Maybe some is totally genetic, but other people it may be environmental. And let's figure out why, so we can minimize that severe autism and support those kids that need our support, and try to prevent it for those kids where we can.
One thing I have found really heartbreaking, and I'm one of those parents, is that, they say they just don't trust their pediatricians anymore. It's not the same, and they are worried about whether their pediatrician is doing what's best for their child. And you're a parent, I'm a parent, and like every parent who's listening to this, they will resonate with the fact that, like you said, we just want the best for our children. But because there's so much conflicting information online today, and there's one doctor saying one thing and another doctor saying something completely different, and then you go to a pediatrician who you basically, it could be your family pediatrician that's been going on since, your parents and then your grandparents, and there's a lot of those, like it's like your family pediatrician. And I mean, no offense to family pediatricians at all, but a lot of the information that you study in universities or in schools is, science changes every year. Every 6 years, you need to kind of like update yourself. And like those pediatricians, or just even doctors who are not doing the research themselves, or those that are much older and still have this kind of like archaic way of thinking, like how can parents trust doctors again and pediatricians again when there's this now gap between what they know and what they see online versus what their doctors are telling them, and they can't trust? Now, we need doctors. We need them in our lives, and they're part of our medical system. I mean, they go to years and years, over decades, of training and learning. And we can't, kind of forget their role in our society, right? Because they're obviously super important. You're super important to us. But at the end of the day, parents are not convinced anymore, not like how they used to be in the medical system. So what can parents do and doctors do together, combined, to work together and not against each other?
Yeah, it's a great point, and confidence in medicine is at an all-time low. There's no question about it.
Especially after COVID, so it changed a lot.
Yeah, and doctors deserve it, honestly. I mean, the medical profession has been not truthful with people, and has not kept up to date, and says things that are verifiably untrue very consistently, and force mandates and all sorts of things. So I understand the hesitancy. I think if we want to build bridges back, number one, we have to remember that it's not us versus them. Like doctors and parents on the same team. We all want healthy kids. We may not always agree on how to get there, but I think we have to combine against pharma and big companies. I think that's the other side of things, not parents versus doctors. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think parents have to feel okay asking questions. I think we have to be okay with understanding that you have to have open conversations with your doctor. And if you're with a doctor that's not willing to have these conversations, then maybe they're not right for you. And if enough people do that, then I think doctors will be open to things. Nobody can keep up to date with information anymore. It's not possible. There's just so much information. So I think a good doctor at this point is open to having discussions and opening to look into things, and doesn't poo-poo and kind of mock you for your questions, and says, like maybe if they don't know, like, I'm not sure about that. I've not heard about it. It seems reasonable, but like, let me look into it. We can discuss this further. I think that's what I think you want, is a partnership with your doctor, and not somebody who just parrots the information. But I hope and I think that having discussions like these are going to start to open people's minds, because there's just so much that we're taught, like, for example, the autism literature and vaccines. And when I was in training, you're told like the science is settled, it's been debunked. And you've heard that for decades. The science is settled, it's been debunked. And when I went to do my book, Between the Shot and a Hard Place, I thought what I thought I was going to find was all this really good information, that we have these fantastic studies and we've looked at this in depth, and here's why we say as a organization, like, vaccines don't cause autism and it's been debunked. And then I was also going to find, because I know some of the other stuff too, I know there are some other studies, maybe not as good quality, but like there are some stuff out there that says that maybe there's some association, and certainly parents feel that way. So what I wanted to do was kind of show both sides, right? And like, but here's the majority of the research, but here's some of the other stuff. When you actually go look at the research, there's almost nothing. Like the things that exist are on MMR and thimerosal, the mercury component, and not all vaccines. There's no research on vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids. There's no research on all vaccines, really just on MMR only, and that's MMR against kids that didn't get MMR in the setting of getting their other vaccines. So you have some decent information about MMR, but not the rest of the vaccines. And so how can we be saying the research is debunked? It's not been debunked. We haven't even studied it. I don't know if vaccines cause autism or not. Nobody does because we haven't actually studied it.
Wow. Is there nobody, there's no literature at all and no studies at all on vaccines correlating to autism?
Not on all vaccines. So there is some research on MMR. There are a few studies on, there's like a study on antigens, there's several studies on thimerosal, but there aren't research on aluminum. There's not research on the rest of the vaccines. You get MMR when you're 1, but you get all sorts of vaccines before then. You have to look at the cumulative effect. You have to look at the other vaccines. You can't just look at MMR. You have to look at vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids to have an appropriate assessment of whether autism has anything to do with vaccines. I don't know if it does. It may have nothing to do with it. But to so confidently repeat it's been studied, it's debunked, like that's just false. It's really easily verifiably false. You could look at any research. The only reason that you can say what people say is it's not been proven to cause autism, therefore it doesn't cause autism. So it's just a circular thinking. It's never been proven because it's never been studied, so therefore it doesn't cause it. And like that's not science. Science is actually studying it to see if it does or it doesn't.
It's the same situation, just the study that we've just been focused on male biology this entire time when it comes to human health, and women have also been focused on like the studies based on male biology, male physiology, and women are just eating that type of protein, working out the same way. It's the same, right? And it's only now that it's been being debunked that actually women's hormones are too complicated. We don't want to study that. So we'll just go and focus on male hormones, male biology, male physiology, and then give that to women too. And can you imagine for the last how many decades women have been focused on that? And no wonder women are having PCOS, early menopause, autoimmune issues, not able to handle so many female biological functions in the right way because of that. So it's been crazy how much science has been changing just over, the last couple of years. And like these things that we have people like yourself who've just been doing further research and trying to understand it in a more deeper level where there was no other doctor who seemed to want to question that in the past. Just blows my mind completely. And so for me, I'm just really trying to understand if a parent comes to you today and says to you, what are the vaccines that my newborn needs to take? What will you tell them?
Yeah, I tell them the same thing I say in the book and the same thing I've always said. I can't tell people what to do. The only thing that's recommended in America is the CDC schedule. So that is the thing that's been studied and recommended. Anything outside of that is a parental choice. And we would have to discuss risk versus benefits and come up with whatever plan makes sense for them. And so people in my office, they make that decision. If they want to do the regular schedule, they do it. If they want to do a slower schedule, we come up with one based on their comfort level. But again, it's not based on science because nothing's ever been studied. We don't have any research on slower schedules. We don't have any research on what might be better or worse or what the benefits versus risks are. So people are just really making it up themselves. It's kind of the Wild West right now of like, well, this thing seems to be a little bit more common. There's more of this in the area. This is more deadly. This is less likely. And so they kind of make it up as they go. Lots of people, maybe they do one at a time. They come in every month or two, as opposed to doing the regular schedule. So that's how people do it. But I mean, everyone's different. Some people say, oh, I don't want to do any vaccines. Some people say, I don't want to do any vaccines till my kids too. Some people say, I want to do one every 4. It just depends. I think everyone's different in their comfort level, but that really comes down to personal choice. Because I can't tell you that it's safer to get a vaccine when you're 3 than when you're 1, because it's not been studied. It's just been studied when you were 1.
So what was your choice for your children?
So I don't talk about to my kids, but I just leave it for them to, if they want to talk about it, because everybody always asks me. I think
Yeah. It's just good to know what was your personal decision for your children, because being a
thing is in the office.
being a pediatrician is just kind of like good to know as a pediatrician what would you do for your children.
I don't tell people what I do with them. I think it's up to them to keep their personal health stuff for them. But in the office, we do, all sorts of things.
Yeah, and other fellow pediatricians, are they more inclined towards the functional health space, or they're really just focused on conventional medicine at the moment? It's in the space that you're in currently.
Most doctors are focused on conventional medicine, but I certainly know for sure that it's changing. People want integrative medicine. They're talking about it. They're very interested in it. So that is pushing it back against modern medicine. I think that there are more and more doctors, especially the younger ones, that are open to it. I have lots of people reaching out to me all the time, med students and young doctors that say, hey, like, I'm so happy you're talking about this. I've had questions too. I'm excited to read your book, or thank you for writing the book, or what, like things like that people have reached out or on podcasts, and they're just like, you know what, I'm so glad we're finally talking about it, because I have these questions too. And again, like, I'm not against vaccines, but some of the stuff doesn't make sense to me, and these are the questions that I'm getting asked by families, or that I'm wondering about. And so the more discussion that we can have on that, I think the better place that we can get to. And ultimately, as I said kind of at the beginning, the book is not about convincing people to do anything. It's about informing people about what we know, going through the big questions that parents have, and opening up discussion. I want debate. I want discussion. I want nuance. I want to bring the word vaccine out from the shadows. We should be able to talk about it. You shouldn't be able to not talk about it with your friends. We shouldn't be able to not talk about it on a podcast. Like, we should be able to talk about this, so that way people can go out there and say, all right, well, wait a minute. I thought the science on autism was settled. Let me go look at it. I don't believe Dr. Joel. He sounds like an anti-vaxxer kook. Let me go look at it myself. Wait a minute. Like, there actually isn't research. Like, that's what I want people to do. If a bunch of doctors go look at the research, they're not going to think the research is debunked if they actually go look at it. There's just no way. It's just not, like, it just hasn't been done. So I think talking about it makes a huge difference. And I hope the book helps with that. Because I think it does so maybe in a non-confrontational way, where my wife's a lawyer and she does a lot of mediations. And so I've really learned from her, like, you can't always get to, she does family law, so you can't always get two people divorcing to agree on things. Usually you can't, but you can help them to see the other side's perspective, so you can find some sort of middle ground to move forward. And I think that's what we need in medicine right now. There are two extremes, and we need everybody to see the other side's point of view, not because we want a very hardcore anti-vaxxer to get vaccines, but like, understand why somebody who wants to get vaccines wants to get them. If you're someone who's super pro-vaccine, like, understand why a parent might be hesitant, so that we can have a little bit more compassion, and understand what people think is missing in the research, so maybe we can get some of that.
Have you ever had a parent come to you and say, I don't want to give any vaccines, I don't want my child to have any vaccines at all?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so have they ever come back and said there were problems with their kids?
Problems with their kids? No. I mean, have they ever had like any other condition or disease? Sure. I from my, small amount of kids I've seen, I feel like they have fewer chronic conditions than kids that do get vaccines. But
Oh, that's an interesting one. I like that. I like that topic a lot.
unvaccinated in general, at least from what I've seen, have fewer chronic conditions. But I just don't see them as much, so it's hard to know. Sometimes they don't come in as much. So presumably they're healthier, but maybe not. That's not scientific, but I think a lot of doctors who see both kind of, kids that are vaccinated and unvaccinated have seen that. And I think that goes back to, again, that's the biggest question. Do vaccines prevent you from the diseases that they protect you against? Yeah, they do. I think we have very good research to show that most of these vaccines decrease your risk to get the disease. The question is, at what cost? And that's what we have to figure out.
It's a cost of a lot, because you're not personalizing those vaccines. So until vaccines become more personalized, and that you're actually doing genetic tests based on these vaccines that you're going to be giving the children, I think a parent like myself, if I had a child again, or aspiring parents, or those that are pregnant now and about to have a child, I would feel a bit more confident to want to go and give my children, my newborn, a vaccine when I know it's personalized for my child. So that's where we need to kind of move towards, I think.
I think we're a long way away from that. I don't think that we're anywhere near the knowledge with genetics to be able to do that yet. I think that's the goal that we should have, is to personalize it. I think, at least for me in the short term, I would much prefer to acknowledge the risks that are possible, and to open up discussion that there could be risks, and to study what those risks might be, so we have a better understanding of the risk versus benefits. Everything has a risk. Cancer medication has a risk. You could lose your hair, it can affect your immune system, but it could save your life. So you need to know what that is so you can make that decision. In the short term, I think we need that research to start.
Yeah.
And in the long run, I think we need to look into individualized medicine. But I don't think that we're going to have like individualized vaccines the next, decade or two. So
You never know. You never know, Joel. It might come. It might just surprise us and we might get it.
maybe. I hope so. I hope we get that research, but I think that's going to take a while to get that kind of research. And I don't think we're that smart with genetics yet that we're quite there. But I think that if we do that kind of research, we will be in the next decade or two.
Yeah. Do you feel like, pediatricians just don't know enough and are like not confident enough on the vaccines, and that's the reason why they don't tell parents of the risks?
I think that we were never taught it. So you would have to you'd have to even be aware there's another discussion to start learning about it. I don't think that, well, I know doctors do not give vaccines because they want to harm kids. They give vaccines because they feel like it's the best thing, and that it's one of the best things that have ever been created in the world. And they're protecting kids and helping them to be healthy. Like, that's why doctors give vaccines. It's not for money. It's not for any other reason. They do it for free. Most doctors very much believe in vaccines. I think that they don't discuss some of these things because because we haven't studied it, and they're not aware of it, and they've never thought about it from the other perspective. And I think that it's a religion almost of vaccines, and that has to be broken before something can change. I think that doctors have to be made aware of the other side, and be willing to listen to it. And I think if they were, they would be a little bit more open to having more nuanced conversations. They'd still probably give vaccines for the most part, but I think they'd be at least more open to the concerns that some parents have, and they wouldn't necessarily just kick you out of their office for having a question.
But it's good to know that you mentioned that just doctors are just not aware. And that's the reason why they haven't ever mentioned it, because number one, they never questioned it. They just followed what they were taught to do. And they believe this was good for us. It's good for kids. And like you said, doctors, I mean, their job is not to harm people, right? That's not what they want to do. They don't want to harm children. Yeah, so yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think doctors are inherently bad, and what they want to do is just to harm people. That's definitely not what they're trying to do. But I think it's just that a lot of people, especially parents who have trusted the medical system for various things and have given their children, or even just adults who have trusted the medical system and have ended up with like all sorts of chronic disease and illnesses that are just irreversible. It's hard for them to trust something that gave them that made them, gave them a misdiagnosis, prescribed them pharmaceutical drugs, gave them the problems that they didn't have in the first place and made it worse for them. So you can obviously understand why a lot of people are just hating on doctors and the medical system because of these reasons, right?
I think that the rise of chronic disease is making a lot of parents frustrated because they don't understand why, and they don't have answers, and they're looking for something to blame. And we should figure out why, and again, if vaccines have anything to do with it, we should figure that out. But also whatever other things are going on, which are many, food and toxins and our environment. And I think all those things are important. We need to look into it and not just say like, here's your pill, but like, why does my kid have an autoimmune condition? Why does my kid have asthma? Like, what is it in our environment that's happening that we're creating this? And we also need, again, a little humility to say, look, there are two different worlds that people come from. Doctors work in the hospital, and they go through the training, and they work in the ICU, in the intensive care unit, and they see kids die of some of these diseases or get really sick. They see people die of whooping cough. They see people die of RSV. They see people with measles. They if they're older doctor, they've seen kids get meningitis from Haemophilus or have diphtheria or things that like parents never see. We haven't seen these things anymore, partly because of vaccines, but also because we're just healthier in general. But parents see asthma and autoimmune conditions and all these other chronic diseases, and then they say, okay, like, what is going on? And these are two different worlds and two different perspectives, and we have to see each other's side. And this is why doctors fight for a vaccine so hard, because they don't want to see a kid die of something they feel like they can prevent. And parents don't want to see their kid have one of these chronic conditions, and they want to know if they do have it, why, or what they can do about it. Those are just different worlds, and we have to come together because, again, two things can be true at the same time. You can be worried about minimizing infectious disease and also be worried about minimizing chronic disease. And both these things are important. And medicine is so focused on treatment and vaccines and medication and not on prevention and chronic disease and food and diet and lifestyle and sleep and exercise and all these other things that are important. Both things have to be true. Both things have to be important. We need research on both. We need to focus on both. And we have to spend our time on both. And if we do that, we could be healthier. We could, like you're talking about, we can be centenarians. We can live till we're 120. We could live longer. Like that's what our goal should be. It should not be to stay around 75 years old and just get more chronic disease. And no, we want to live till 100 and we want to live till we're 99 and be healthy at 99. And that's what our goal should be for our kids. And I think that is possible if we focus on both.
You said something so important is that our focus should really just be the root cause of the problem and not treating the symptom. Let's focus on really just a prevention, not even getting to the state where you need to prescribe a pharmaceutical drug. Understand nutrition, lifestyle, sleep, stress, before you even want to go and reach out for your pen and prescribe someone a pharmaceutical drug. You can help them in so many other natural ways. And if you had a chance to, let's just say, redesign the pediatric care from the bottom up, what would you do? What would you be your, what would you account in terms of toxins, gut health, brain health, environment? How would you do that? And what is your vision for the future when it comes to kids thriving?
I mean, if I can redo the medical system, I think the first step would be, if you can get a little break, give the doctors some training all the way through in some of these other areas, like not to be woo-woo out there, just to like, okay, here are the things that are the concern. Here's some of the new research on lifestyle. Here's what's going on with chronic disease and the information, and let doctors kind of go through that so they can see some of the things that they're not reading that aren't in a pediatric medical journal or whatever it is. I think that's one key. Number two, we have to redo the system. I mean, in terms of the medical system, we have to make it a team. And I don't think doctors have time in general to spend 2 hours with patients. So we're going to have to start combining, just like dentists do with hygienists. You need to have it paid so that way someone can see a nutritionist and they could see an exercise counselor. And they can have somebody work with them and a diet plan, all these things like that could be part of the system. So you see your dentist at the end, right? Your hygienist does all the work and talks to you about everything. And then your dentist waltzes in, looks at your x-rays and checks your teeth. Like a doctor could do that. That would be possible. I mean, I think it'd be nice if doctors could talk about this stuff more, but probably not super practical for the system in the moment. So maybe you work as a team and you go in and you get 20 minutes of diet discussion and they write that down, and you go to a nurse and they talk about your life and they ask, okay, what are you doing? Or somebody goes to your house, once a year. But like, these are things we could do if we paid for it. You could have a team and we could talk about your general health, and your doctor could just be there for the big things. That would be great. In the short term, parents have to take back their control. I mean, the medical system is not going to change very quickly. So we have to become aware of all the things that we're doing and be okay with asking questions. And I think from a advocacy and political standpoint, we need some big changes. I mean, we need big changes in our city. We need acknowledgements of the major risk factors for disease and chemicals and toxins and our crappy food. And we have to redesign that. We have to redesign having local food, decrease the chemicals we're using, try to study as best as we can to get the least harmful chemicals we can use on our food.
And it's happening now with Bobby Kennedy in government and changing a lot of things. So that's something positive.
It's a lot to do, but I think you might hate Secretary Kennedy, you might love him, but there is no question that he's trying to shake things up, and shake up is what we need. And so I think net positively, probably over the long run, will be a good thing. But yeah, we need changes. I mean, we need people exercising more and moving more and sunlight. Like these are all things that we have to organize back into our city, back into our life, which were changed over the last 50 years because we went for convenience, and we have to recognize like we need to cook more. We need to get more fresh food. We need to move more. If you want to be healthy, like that's going to get us a lot farther than any medication will.
My final question to you is, what does Be That Life mean to you?
To me, it means really getting back to a state of wellness and really focusing on those important things like family and health, and really trying to get back to that life, the life that think a lot of people had many years ago, where they focus on family, focus on meals, focus on appreciation, as opposed to quicker, faster, easier, cheaper. I think that's what it means to me, is just getting back to maybe a little bit more of the simple basics, not the rocket science, to just simple lifestyle factors to be healthy and well.
I think every single parent or parent to be has to listen to this podcast episode, because it is so enlightening and powerful to be able to speak to someone that is been doing this for such a long time, understands the risks, understands the benefits, and to be able to come out and talk about it from a standpoint of true human compassion. And, thank you so much for all the work that you do, for definitely writing that book. I encourage every single person out there to buy it if you just don't understand anything about vaccines, which I'm sure nobody does. And we're questioning the system so much every single day. And to be able to sit with someone who truly understands it, and who sits in both sides, actually, conventional and functional, and advocating for both, and respecting the system, and also wanting the more natural way. I think we definitely need more people who are speaking up about this. So thank you for that, and I highly respect everything that you're doing and admire you for your work. And let's continue to spread the word and create that awareness. And yeah, I am going to be in the US soon, so I hope I get a chance to meet you when I'm there too. We can catch up over a matcha.
I would love that. Thanks for chatting about this. I mean, I know it's a tough topic, so I appreciate you being open to it.
Of course, of course. I'm always open to these kind of things. We're all trying to change the world, opening up people's mindset to a different kind of culture, a healing era is like what I like to call it. We're living in that era right now. Thank you so much, Dr. Joel. I appreciate you.
Thank you.